in all of Jesus' teachings, he's always focused on the outsider, the outcast, the person who's left out or the person who's different. And so as a Christian, I think my concern is for the Muslim kid and the Jewish kid, the Hindu kid, the atheist kid who's sitting in a classroom who now has a poster on the wall forced by the government that says, your religion is inferior or you're not welcome here. And I just think if Jesus saw that, he would weep for those students and would demand that we love them as ourselves. Jesus's movement was that he was simplifying the law, right? He simplified it into 2 commandments, love God and love neighbor. Those are the only 2 commandments that we Christians should keep our focus on. And Jesus regularly got into conflicts with the religious authorities, right? Jesus is always getting in trouble with the church of his time because he is rejecting legalism and embracing the spirit of the law, which is loving your neighbor as yourself. And so in our modern context, that should mean loving our gay neighbors as ourselves. And to me, Christian nationalism is just the latest iteration of that, whether it's the 10 Commandments bill, whether it's the bill, I don't know if you read about this, a bill that we passed that allows schools to replace school counselors with untrained, unsupervised religious chaplains. That to me, again, is an example of Christian nationalism. It's using the state, it's using political power to elevate one religious tradition over all the others. It's using governmental power to dominate our neighbors instead of loving them as ourselves, which is exactly what we're called to do as Christians. My granddad was a Baptist minister in South Texas, and so it was a part of my upbringing. And I had really not thought about doing it myself, but I think I had just loving thy neighbor is really hard sometimes. And the work I do in the legislature is my attempt to love my neighbor through the bills I pass, through the work that I do on prescription drugs, on childcare, on public schools, on justice reform. But I was losing faith on whether I was actually doing what I came here to do. And so I made that decision to go to seminary to follow Jesus' first commandment, which is to love God. Those are the 2 commandments he gave us, love God and love neighbor. And as a seminarian and a lawmaker, I'm starting to figure out how these 2 commands, how they relate to each other, how they sustain each other.
But there's also people that they are malicious. They don't care about people that are struggling, and they only care about their peers. They care about enriching the people that are already wealthy. Yes.
I do feel like those people I have found are very loving parents and spouses and even friends.
Isn't that crazy?
And to me, that means they haven't broadened that circle of concern. Right? I'm always, because you want to think some of these people are just 2-dimensional villains. I sometimes fall victim to that thinking. But then I spend time with them. I'm like, this person is kind and funny and good-hearted and treats his wife well and treats his kids well, treats his neighbors, his immediate neighbors. So my challenge is always like, how do I try to expand that circle a little bit more to where they care just as much about a neighbor who lives in a completely different city than the one who's right next door to them in Highland Park or River Oaks or one of these nice neighborhoods, right? That to me is the challenge, is seeing everyone as your neighbor, not just the people who live right next to you.
Yeah.
And that's that's the central teaching of my faith and in most of the great faith traditions. I mean, that sometimes we try to pretend that there's all these diverse religions and who knows who's right. In reality, there is giant ethical overlap between the major world religions. There is literally not a faith tradition that tells you when someone gets sick, see how much money you can make off of them.
Right.
No religion teaches that. None of them, right? Like,
right.
There's no one that's, love your neighbors only when they agree with you. Right? That's not what any of the faith traditions teach. Like, there is this consensus, this ethical consensus. And the reason I think we try to pretend that all these religions are so different is because we are threatened by that moral consensus of how you should treat one another. I think the most revolutionary teaching in my religion is the teaching to love your enemy. I mean, it's crazy from 2 perspectives. One, it's Jesus is acknowledging that we're going to have enemies. Because you could see a world where he's just like, don't have enemies, right? But if you're going to do difficult work, if you're going to speak your mind, if you're going to stand up to entrenched power, you're going to get some opponents, right?
Yeah.
But then the revolutionary part is that you are called to love your opponents and your enemies just as you love yourself.
Yeah.
It's easy to say in church.
Right.
Imagine, I try and fail every day to do that in the legislature, to see my opponents as children of God, to see Donald Trump as a child of God. I'm probably going to get a primary challenge right there for saying that. But
But he is.
He is.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for progressives and Democrats to get their head around. But it's like Dorothy Day, who was this great Catholic activist for the poor and labor organizer, she had this great quote where she said, "You really only love God as much as you love the person you love the least."
Wow.
You only truly love God as much as you love the person you love the least. In other words, the test of Christianity is not do you love Jesus, because Jesus is pretty lovable. The test is do you love Judas? And that is radical.
Yeah.
And I think that is the key to saving this whole American experiment.
Right.
Is how do you love your enemies? That unity, that loving your enemy is not just morally good. It's not just idealistic. It is good strategic advice, because when we're united, when we're together, then we make it a lot harder for those two guys to come in and dismantle these ladders of opportunity that we have. And